Hello guys, good morning, good afternoon, or even good evening. Welcome into Hopper's Motorsport Vlogs. How are we doing? So today is Tuesday, the 30th of June, 2026. Hope everyone's doing well. So today I'm going to be doing a vlog. It's been a while since I've done one. And I think this one's going to be very interesting for many fans of the British Touring Car Championship, aka the BTCC. So, I'll give a background to myself, just in case no one is familiar who I am or what I do. I am Hoppers. I am, of course, the voice and the face of Hoppers Motorsport Vlogs. I've been doing this now for 7 years. Can you believe 7 years? Yes. And I'm an avid British touring car fan since 1999. So yeah, it's been 27 years of following the BTCC. So yeah, so this one's going to be a bit informative. It's probably going to be probably very interesting to many fans of the British touring cars, especially with this season. We're currently in the summer break. With around 3 and a bit weeks to go, maybe 4 and a bit weeks to go until the second half of the season kickstarts at Thruxton. However, my vlog today is about Ash Sutton. Yes, I'll put a picture of Ash Sutton. I will be next to him with that picture, but it is a picture to describe who I'm talking about. So Ash Sutton will appear right here, right now. And then, yeah, so basically, do we think Ash Sutton will become the first 5-time British Touring Car Champion at the end of the 2026 season? Many people already have stated, or many people think, I could be wrong, but many people may think that he's got it sewn up. He's got it sewn up already for this year, obviously racing for Napa Racing UK in the new Focus Titanium. That car has been, since the get-go this year, since the opening round at Donington, up to now, has been a very dominant car, dare I say it. But, you know, will Ash Sutton become the first BTCC 5-time champion? So we're going to talk about it, and we're going to go into depth. And personally, I'm going to be honest, straight up, depending on what the second half of the season brings, I think it's going to be very close. However, there is some permutation. Well, there's some stuff to take in for granted for Ash Sutton to become the first BTCC 5-time champion. Obviously, those who know the BTCC this year have a qualifying race on the Saturday, aka the race to pole. So basically, what that means is there's only one free practice session on a Saturday morning. There's a 2-part qualifying session, obviously to determine the grid for the race to pole, and then there's the half distance and half points race to pole for the Sunday races, the Sunday's opening race, which has spiced it up a bit this year, because since Donington Park back in April, we're going roughly 2 months ago, that the race to pole at Donington Park was proven to be a very interesting race to pole qualifying session, or qualifying race, should we say, with reigning champion Tom Ingram ultimately won on the road, but however, due to a post-race penalty, it dropped him down the order. He had a 5-second penalty because he was out of his grid box, and which then ultimately gifted Cataclean Plato Racing's driver Dan Rowbottom the qualifying race, the race to pole position. And ultimately, in that qualifying race, the race to pole, Ash Sutton ended up retiring. And he was trying to chase down the likes of Dan Rowbottom and, of course, Tom Ingram. Robo was already trying to basically get in front for Cataclean Plato Racing. But amongst that was Ash Sutton trying to make a charge through typical Ash Sutton style, which he tried to go and overtake Tom Ingram. However, he clipped the back of Tom Ingram's car, which then ultimately sent him on the grass, then ultimately made him spin, and then ultimately get collected by none other than his teammate Dan Camish, which then Ash ended up in the gravel. He tried to get out the gravel at Redgate, but unfortunately he retired in the first race to pole, which ultimately leads us to what happened in race 1 at Donington Park. You know, Donington Park for Tom Ingram was a very difficult event, going into, you know, the first proper race meeting of the year. You know, being reigning champion, you've got that target on your back that everyone else wants to have that crown. But Ash Sutton, no doubtably, made his way up the field in race 1, whereas Tom Ingram had a complete disaster with a lot of things, and I believe he ended up, I think he failed right height, which ultimately hampered him, if I remember rightly. And then race 2, he didn't start because of an alternator failure, which then progressed Ash Sutton from where he started on the grid in race 2 to then ultimately win race 2. So, you know, it was just showing that Tom Ingram's bad luck in the opening race meeting of the year cost him dearly. So basically, you know, the alternator failed, which made him not start, and then, you know, Tingram had to start from the back in race 3 at Donington, which then ultimately was possibly a penalty was imposed for track limits, and there's a few issues. So that Hyundai i30M Fastback Team Virtue was having issues already. So by then, Ash had won race 2 and 3 at Donington, eked out a slender, well, slight championship advantage going into Brands Hatch, which was the next meeting, round number 2, where he took a convincing race to pole victory, and then ultimately took race 1, and then obviously finished thereabouts. You know, I think he finished on the podium. I can't remember, but yeah, I think he finished on the podium at Brands in race 2. And then, of course, in the final race, you know, he ultimately, I think he went to go and win again in race 3. And, you know, Snetterton in the boiling heat, you know, it just seemed the race to pole on the Saturday at Snetterton was another blow for car 116, where Ash had a puncture, had to pit, and ultimately then ended up pitting again because he overheated the engine, which then he didn't finish, which was now the second race to pole of the year where he hadn't finished. So that was gifting other people chances to basically claw back, or basically Tom Ingram to claw back some points, albeit in race 2 at Snetterton, you know, Ash Sutton masterclass yet again to get through to, you know, pretty much, you know, obviously get high up in race 1 as far as you can get in race 1 to then get a good position for race 2. And albeit car 80, Tom Ingram, had another alternator failure, which then dampened his spirits for, you know, for race 2 at Snetterton, and then ultimately race 3 at Snet. Tom Ingram had a penalty imposed for too many track limit warnings, which ultimately dropped in 10 seconds. And for the second time this season, the alternator went, and no doubt there was some, the 10-second penalty in race 3 at net because of track limits. Ultimately paid dividends, and it was looking likely a charge from the back in race 2 to get onto the podium to start with, albeit due to the post-race 10-second penalty after the race imposed, it dropped Ingram down the order, which ultimately would have been a kick in the teeth. And then we got to Alton Park, and Ash Sutton being, outshone this time by his teammate, none other than Dan Camish. So Dan Camish got the race to pole victory on the Saturday, and then the opening race meeting on the Sunday. And this was a turning point because it was only a couple of weeks ago that the race to pole had a different winner. Not for the first time this season, but for Ash Sutton to have an illustrious, basically, Alton Park with the likes of potentially, possibly finishing, I think it was down in 7th eventually, or maybe higher up, I can't remember exactly where he finished in race 1, but he dropped to 7th, I think it was 7th or 8th after opening lap contact with Josh Cook and then a bit of contact with Adam Morgan. But Ash made his way up into Ash Sutton style in race 1 at Alton Park to potentially, try and eke out that advantage. And then obviously, of course, in race 2, he goes and wins it by the biggest margin it's ever seen in BTCC, over 19 seconds to the other car, which over 19 seconds in a race to go and win. That car, as I'm going to say later on in this vlog, that car is unstoppable. And then, of course, in the final race, I think he finished on the podium. I can't remember top of my head. He must have done. But it just seems fitting. So, my question is, will Ash Sutton become the first ever 5-time British Touring Car Champion? Well, we're not even at the halfway stage yet. Like I say, we've got 3 and a bit weeks to go until we go back racing for the second half of the year at Thruxton. However, Tom Ingram, who's lying second at the moment in the championship, has to score or outscore Ash by 8 points every race meeting. So that includes the race to pole and the 3 races on a Sunday. If Tom Ingram, for example, ends up clawing the championship back and it goes to the season finale at Brands Hatch, we could be in for a dogfight. However, I think Napa Racing UK with that Focus Titanium, that car is lightningly quick. It's been pegged back a bit, but it seems to be the car to beat at the moment. But do I think Ash Sutton's going to be the first ever 5-time British Touring Car Champion? The answer's going to be wait and see. However, I have a feeling that it possibly could happen. If Tom Ingram has a complete or ends up having more disasters, we could see Ash Sutton potentially crowned champion at Silverstone, which is the meeting before the season finale. However, there is certain circuits that Tom Ingram does exceptionally well at, one of them being, of course, Silverstone. But then Ash has a great record at Thruxton. He's done predominantly well there in the past. Say last year in, I think it was race 2, where he got a lightning start, and before he got to the exit of sorry, can't even get my words up. Before he even got on the exit of Allard, he was in the lead. And you think to that move last year, how? You know, he's had lightning starts where he seems to, if he's in a good place, he will be in the lead by maybe the end of lap 1. He seems to know what he's doing. Him and his engineer Tonio Caruso seem to have that match made where they know what they're doing with that car. That car is unstoppable. But there's going to be some circuits where Ash may find it difficult, i.e. in the past he's tangled with people at Knockhill, for example. Obviously, the up and down roller coaster up in Scotland. You know, Donington Park GP, for example, there's been a few ding-dongs with Tom Ingram's 8 last year. And then, of course, Silverstone, where infamously in 2024, where they had that last lap battle in race 3 in the wet, where they had a bit of contact. And then you come to Brands Hatch season finale, where ultimately the championship can be won or lost. So possibly if, you know, Ash gets his foot down and carries on this momentum and stays out of trouble. However, if you think about it, you've got basically 5 more race to poles and you've got 3 races on a Sunday. You have got to be in control. You can't just go and say, right, the race to pole, that doesn't matter. It does, because it's points. But, yes, okay, it's half points. But do we think Ash realistically would have this 5th title sewn up so quickly if Tom Ingram, for example, faltered? It's so difficult to explain the ethos and the ways I feel about it. But personally, I couldn't say that we think this season it would be a 3rd title for Tom Ingram. Ingram needs to have better luck. He needs to have a clear head, which I think at the moment he hardly does. And dare I say it, there's a lot to take in. And I think it's going to become a mentally and physically challenging, because for someone like Tom Ingram, who is now a 2-time British Touring Car Champion, to go back to back, which has not been proven since 2020 and 2021, it's going to be a big ask. But that Hyundai is also quick. However, it's not as quick as the Focus Titanium. But then again, you've got circuits that will suit the likes of Tom Ingram and, of course, Ash Sutton. But ideally, Thruxton, in a couple of weeks' time, will determine what will happen. I will be surprised if Ash Sutton does not get his 5th title this year after all this hard work so far. Bear in mind, when I'm doing this vlog, we're still in the summer break. But I think Ash possibly has one hand on that 5th title. But what's next? What is next? Because if, for example, Ash has a run of bad luck and Tingram calls them points back and it goes to Brands Hatch the season finale and the last race of the season, and potentially my scenario would be goes to the last race of the season, the last lap of the race, the final race of the year, and they're both near each other, there is possibly a lot to take in. And dare I say it, who knows? I think personally Ash has it, potentially could have his 5th title. But then what's next for him? Does he come back for another year and try and make it a record-breaking 6th? Who knows? But anyway, do you think Ash Sutton this season will have the 5th title? Let me know in the comments what you think, whether you agree or disagree. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. I've been Hopper's Motorsport Vlogs. Until the next vlog, take care. Ta-ra.